Lenoir. I'm back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program at 17 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour. Joining me now on the phone is the deputy editor of your award-winning independent nonprofit source of news and views. Free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. The Commons. Good morning to you, Randy.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. What, is she further away today? You sounded like you had to raise your voice decibel a little bit. Did you put an addition onto the compound or something?
No.
Just an especially exuberant hi to Joyce this morning, which is great. I always appreciate Joyce tuning in from the other end of the compound to our conversations. Now, Randy, you and I talk a lot about different things happening in different communities, and, there's a certain level of crazy in town politics, local politics. Brattleboro and Bellows Falls, Rockingham always seem to have something going on. Vernon of late, especially having it, but it's landed on Newfane this particular cycle. Wendy Levy, one of your staff members at the Commons, was talking about this mystery letter that was circulated to voters in Newfane prior to the August 9th vote on the $950,000 bond for new town offices, on stationery or using an emblem for the town of Newfane, but not signed by any of Newfane. And at the time, she didn't know who the writer was. Turns out it was the town clerk.
Yes, as soon as she got back from the program with you, she was making some more phone calls on the story and talked with Gloria Cristelli, the town clerk, and she confessed.
And she confessed that she wrote the letter. I'm not sure what I make of her explanation as far as, she said, I didn't use any of the town resources. It was on paper that I bought. It was using postage that I bought, although, she did probably use a town mailing list to mail this letter out. I don't know what to make of her explanation about why she sent this anonymously.
Well, I had some people who were going to sign, but they backed out at the last minute. Sounds kind of not exactly the best alibi one could have for this letter. But this whole issue has been just kind of spun out of control because you think you're dealing with a town building that's kind of falling apart. It's not really suited for what it's being used for, the Center for Town Operations in Newfane. And it's just been a constant source of argument about fixing this building or replacing it.
Yeah, and people, if they read the bottom of the fold story about the mystery letter, make sure you go to the Jump because there's a couple other stories there related to this, including the post-mortem when she speaks to other members of both the administration there, Sharon Meckel, and then one of the board members, Gary Delius. Gary also on the building committee, but it sounds to me like he is one of the people who doesn't think a building is necessary.
Yes, and of course, he is not working there every day like Sharon Meckel and Gloria and some of the other town people are that have to deal with a building where that's just totally outmoded and unsuitable.
Right. He talks about some of the funding mechanisms that he was concerned about with debt to the town, and it sounds to me like they pretty much were able to debunk any of those things. But the one that he really talks about, which I found striking, is the distrust of government. Since he's part of government, and I know he's relaying feedback that he's gotten from the community, but you would think as a member of the select board, he would be somebody who would be able to dispel some of those questions about distrust of government. Seems to me he's not necessarily interested in doing that.
Well, unless Trumpism is starting to spread up the West River Valley.
Right.
And this whole thing that, government is a them and not an us.
Yeah, I mean, but he is them in this case. He's an elected official in the town of Newfane. You would think that he feels that the voice is there for people who might have a distrust of government. I mean, I don't know. I don't know these people personally who are players in this drama, and it does seem a bit of a drama here. We even have perhaps somebody breaking in and trying to fiddle with one of the computers there. It does feel like something that I don't know what is exactly going on in Newfane that would foment this kind of culture.
Yeah, because you don't think of Newfane as being a town full of kind of tinfoil hat, Tea Party type folk.
No. But maybe there is that contingency there. To me, it's been a community that has had a hard time getting participation, right? I mean, a couple of years ago, they had one member of the school board, nobody seeking office there. It feels like to me they've been a non-participant in community governance, and maybe it takes something like a $950,000 bond for a town office and nostalgia about this crumbling building going to a private entity, WW Building Supply, that could probably take the building and do something with it. They would have the funds to probably do something with it, right?
Yeah, they might do something with it, or they just might plow it down.
Right.
Don't know. The building next to it, which used to be an antique store, is now kind of used as storage by WW. Their operation seems to be kind of expanding out.
Yeah. Sure.
And it's the only lumber yard in the West River Valley. It's kind of has a important function.
Now, Shannon Meckel talks a little bit in the post-mortem story on page A5 with Wendy about a recount, but it's a 60-vote spread against this bond, 286 to 226. That, to me, doesn't really warrant a recount. They're not going to make up enough votes there, I don't think. Do you?
No.
Yeah, that just seems a non-starter. So basically, they're stuck, right? I mean, the town law or state law, they can't go back and rebond this again.
No, they get one shot at it, and they present it to the voters. The voters rejected. Now they have to come up with another plan.
And how do they come up with that plan if that includes bonding? It's going to be very interesting how they make that language work in a way that doesn't violate that law. I found it interesting, Gary Delius, concerned about incurring this kind of debt if there's a natural disaster. It sounds to me like that's the only way they're going to get a new building is to have a natural disaster come and somehow knock down this one.
So they're waiting for FEMA money to fix the building. But unfortunately, if that happened, they'd also lose all their town records and whatever other important materials that run the town. And I don't think they'd like to pursue that route. No.
Well, if they get a new building, hopefully they'll put security cameras in there and figure out what exactly is going on with the computer break-in there. That's another little side story on page A5 by Wendy. But yeah, interesting times in Newfane for sure. I guess everybody gets a turn. Look out, Randy. Dummerston might be next.
No, Dummerston is well run and doesn't have people peeking on other people's computers, unless the Bears are getting wise.
Maybe the Bears are getting wise, indeed. We're talking with Randy Ouellette, Deputy Editor of the Commons. Free on stands every Wednesday, online at commonsnews.org. More of that coming up after the bottom of the hour news break here on Green Mountain Mornings. 68 degrees outside at 20 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Chris Lenoir continuing my conversation now with Randy Ouellette, Deputy Editor of the Commons. Reader-supported, award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County. Free on stands every Wednesday. Online at commonsnews.org. Covering a huge area here in Windham County, including all the way up into the Grafton and Windham area. Randy and Mike Fair's story about the town of Windham agreeing to put the November 8th ballot question to its voters about the Stilesbrook project, the largest array of wind turbines in Vermont, if it should pass. Now, interesting side note to that story is Grafton not yet willing to put that question on their ballot. They want to do a poll first. What do you make of that difference between how the towns are approaching this?
Well, that's a reflection of the problem in Grafton, which is the second home owners want a voice in the siting of the project, but by law, you got to be a resident to vote in a town election. So the only way their voice could be heard in this debate would be to have a poll, because they can't vote on a referendum question. Windham, I guess, has just recognized that you can't do that, and it's been explained to Grafton that they can't do that either, but they're still arguing about it. Windham just decided, we'll just have a referendum.
Well, yeah, Windham, not the same population of second homeowners in that community that there is in Grafton. But also, I wonder, does this indicate any difference in support for the project or against the project between the two towns?
No, nothing. No. Nothing has changed in the last few weeks. The opposition to this project is very intense, and I've heard very few voices in favor of this project. And Iberdrola, the developer of this project, is already on record as saying, we'll respect the opinion of what the people say in the two towns, and it looks very much like it isn't going to go anywhere.
No. And is there any reason to believe Iberdrola would renege on that pledge?
No. I think they know when they're licked, and developers have been trying to put wind turbines on this particular point in between Windham and Grafton for the better part of a decade now, and every attempt has failed.
And that begs the question even more about why the poll. I guess I understand wanting to give a population in Grafton a chance to voice their opposition, but if they know the vote is going to go the way that they want it to, then you're spending money on something that you don't really need to spend money on. I actually wondered when the poll came up if they felt that they didn't have enough support among the second homeowners, and so it was a way to kind of educate them. You know, a poll, you can be very clever in how you word something to put it in a way that gets you, the results you want.
Well, I'm not so sure they're going to go to that level of trickeration to skew the polls and against putting the wind farm there. But there's no support for it out there. There's just too much opposition, and Iberdrola kind of recognizes that and looking for, I think at this point, a nice, easy way to kind of just slink off and not have to worry about the wrath of these two towns.
Yeah, I think that it sounds that way, and we're still going to watch it play out for a couple of more months here as they get to that Election Day ballot vote. And I got to think Grafton will put it on the ballot eventually, don't you think?
Yeah, they will, probably, yeah. But considering that's certainly what's driving, that town's driving the opposition to it with the group they formed against it in a very slick PR campaign to try and block this project.
Right. Now, the towns of Westminster and Bellows Falls have a recent history of not wanting projects built, especially around law enforcement, but state police barracks are now open in Westminster. You were part of the press tour. You had Mike doing the writing, but you were there with your camera taking the photos that are on the front page and the inside of this week's edition of the Commons. What did you think of their new digs? Very
impressive. Apparently, this is kind of the template that the state police is using now for their new barracks, and they're on a barracks building spree because, of course, the state police has kind of evolved over the years, and a lot of the facilities they started with kind of aren't suitable for modern policing. And when you think of what the Brattleboro Barracks was like, which was an old house,
yeah,
retrofitted into a police office. Terry Martin happened, the former state trooper who's and former court officer down at the Brattleboro court, who's now retired completely now. He was up there last Thursday, and he was reminiscing about how bad the place was when it opened.
Yeah. It always had that kind of just ramshackle look about it, that location over there on Western Avenue. The interior, the equipment, I mean, what sort of upgrades have they been given to do the police work that they do? Because a lot of it is also consolidated there now, right? I mean, there's fewer barracks.
Well, this is taking care of both Brattleboro and the Rockingham Barracks.
Right.
It's right very close to exit 5, so the troopers can be on the highway very quickly to respond to a call. But for the most part, they're going to be out in the towns anyways. They're going to be spending very little time in the barracks. I mean, there's one room where each of the troopers has kind of their little cubicle, and that's pretty much to if they have a report that's too long to file from their cruisers, mm-hmm. or just kind of resupply and stop and say hello before they go out again. It's most of the troopers, their days are going to be spent on the road, and
right.
Their offices are going to have 4 wheels on them.
Yeah, it's an instructive lesson as we continue to have the conversation here in Brattleboro about moving police headquarters out of downtown, isn't it, with regards to response time?
Yeah, it's very much, policing is very mobile, and the communications has improved to the point where they know all the dead spots, they know all the spots that are usable for transmitting their reports, but all the cruisers these days are equipped with laptops, and so they can have instant access to information and instant connectivity with their headquarters.
Yeah. Now, I noticed you accompanied Mike for that story to take pictures of the new police barracks up there in Westminster, but I couldn't help but notice that Mike took his own photo for the story about the black gum swamp in Vernon. You didn't want to go to the black gum swamp with Mike?
Actually, that one was one of those stories behind the stories. Mike and his wife decided to go for a little walk in the forest there, and they weren't sure exactly what they were looking at.
Okay,
are these black gum trees?
Right.
And it took a little consult with our favorite forester, Lynn Levine, who lives in Dummerston and is one of our better tree mavens in this county, who finally redeemed a very hot walk in the woods, in the swamp, I should say, for Mike that he guessed correctly, that he got the proper picture of the black gum tree.
Yeah, he did, and news being made about the black gum swamp, and this is on the back of the front section of the Commons, the whole back page article there with the photo and Mike's story about extra protection from the wildlife agencies that oversee it, updating the classification from Class 2 to Class 1, which will get more money and a wider berth of protection for this swamp.
This is a tree that's very rare in the northern U.S. This is one of the few places in New England where this tree can be found, and of course it survived all these years because, as you know, most of Vermont was pretty much clear cut by the 1700s.
Yep.
And 1800s. So most of what you see around is relatively new growth forest.
Right, and people estimate these trees might be as much as 400 years old, and I think they give credit in the story to Vernon for protecting this area, but also still letting people go experience it, because that's really the balance, right? I mean, you want people to be able to experience these wonders of nature, including some trees that in some ways have no business being in this climate, and still letting people see it, but also making sure that it doesn't disturb that ecosystem. It seems like Vernon has done a pretty good job of that so far.
Yeah, and to preserve any kind of public land is kind of a battle these days, because of course, the way people feel about government now.
Right. Getting back to
the Newfane fight from the last segment.
Right.
But, I think people agree that this is a resource for everyone to enjoy, and this fluke of nature that these trees are here and that they managed to survive. That they predate the white visitors to Vermont,
mm-hmm.
and that they've survived centuries of logging is a pretty interesting feat.
I love that you go back to the 70s and the history there of J. Maynard Miller trying to call attention to this and getting it initially designated to get some protection. It probably wouldn't surprise you that in Vernon Elementary School, Mr. Miller gave us a tour of the Black Gum Swamp. I can remember walking through that area of Vernon with my class. I can't remember exactly which year it was, but certainly in the elementary school time. And all I can remember from it is, man, was it creepy. That is one creepy place when you're a kid, but fascinating, especially to think about these trees in that time frame. Speaking of school, it is the school bus schedule issue of the Commons this week. Always an important part of the services that you provide to the community.
Yes, so if you're a Windham Southeast student, you have no excuse for not knowing which bus to get on.
Right. Check that out. It's a whole special insert of the Commons this week. That's one of the signs that summer is coming to an end. That, and I saw some Canadian geese flying overhead. So we know it's about time to get back to school, about time for high school sports to kick up as well.
Well, opening day is next Thursday with Twin Valley boys soccer having their first game up on the hill at Hayford Field in Wilmington. And then the Friday Night Lights on September 2nd. Brattleboro's on the road at Hartford, and BF will be playing Springfield for the trophy.
Yes, indeed. It'll be good to watch some of those games. It'll be good to see you out at some of those fields as we move through the fall. Always good to talk to you on these Fridays, Randy. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right. Commonsnews.org is the online home where you can go and become a member of this reader-supported, award-winning independent news and views source for Windham County. We will be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.